Shalom Chavrim, I'm Stephen Ben-nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. And friends, we want to do a little recap of what we were reporting on yesterday. Of course, we had all kinds of those that were against us coming in fact, trying to spam the channel there with videos that they were saying is the real news about what's happening in Syria and that we were fake news. We do try to deal with, watching comments like this because there's a lot of detractors out there that do not agree with Israeli News Live and are trying to promote propaganda in the region. But of course, Israeli News Live, we do, there are times we do make mistakes, but we always try to correct those mistakes that we make and keep things going on the up and up. And we try to be very honest in our reporting because we're not interested in propaganda. We're not interested in having a bias one way or the other, but telling people the truth. But once again, the very things that we reported, because we happen to be there first on it, have been also supported by 3 mainstream media outlets at this point now. CBS News, BBC, and RT, all confirming the very information that we were sharing with you yesterday about the counterattack that the U.S. did against Syrian forces in the region of Deir ez-Zor province there. Now, we did, of course, the accounts that are brought out with BBC, CBS and RT also helped us to better hone in on exactly what was happening, on some of the things that were very sketchy for us in the beginning. And as well, we also noticed a little bit of differing opinions about what was happening there. Russia taking one side, the Syrian government taking another side, the United States taking yet another side on the events there. So we did not know for sure when we first reported what was going on, but there was a lot of people that tried to say, no, there were not Russian forces killed in the attack. Now, we called it Russian contractors because that's what our sources were sharing with us on the ground. How that actually translated out, we weren't sure about as of yet. CBS, though, was one of the first ones to come in behind what we reported. It said forces hit by U.S. and Syria include Russian mercenaries, official says. That's a Pentagon official that actually stated that. According to the BBC, they say Syria war, Assad's government accuses U.S. of massacre. And of course, the Syrian government was saying 100 were killed as well. Those that were saying that this was totally fabricated. And of course, RT News, Russia comes out, and the Russian ambassador that speaks about it slams the U.S. presence of being there, lets you know that Moscow's pretty upset about what did happen, but Russia's really downplaying and saying there were only 25 wounded. But the Syrian government says there were 100 killed, according to the BBC. And of course, CBS News and BBC both acknowledged that there were Russian mercenaries that were of the target inside of there. Now, as we did say, what we did see in there from the French news that we were sharing with you is that the U.S. was speaking about how this all went down. They said that it was the Free Syrian Army base that was targeted. Of course, there is conflicting reports on that as well. RT is also reporting the Russians said that the attack was not coordinated with Russia, so therefore they did kind of go on their own, but that they were actually targeting an ISIS cell that was protecting an oil field that they were trying to take back that was near that region. So there is differing reports on that. What is interesting, though, CBS says here, pro-regime forces that attack Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF headquarters in northern Syria, and were hit in return by U.S. airstrikes included Russian mercenaries, according to a Pentagon official. If Russians are among those who were killed, this would mark the first time a U.S. airstrike has killed Russians in Syria, CBS News' David Martin reports. All right, now, I would have to say, well, that may be true as far as Americans, but we have to remember what was about a year, 2 years ago there when, again, in the same region of Deir ez-Zor, when the Syrian forces come under a major heavy attack by NATO allies, which did not include actually American planes. I believe it was British that bombed for over an hour, and Russia was constantly on the radio saying, you are not bombing the right people, you are bombing the Syrian forces, which also include, never reported by Russia, 13 Russian soldiers that were killed. All right. So Russia does tend to make light of the matter, and I think that's also to help morale and to keep it away from enemy hands of knowing what the truth is about what happens in war. And that is also done by the U.S. as well in war. Never tell you the truth about how many wounded or dead are actually killed in battle, so that way it doesn't cause a public outcry. But anyway, CBS reported that there. BBC says Syria war, Assad government accused U.S. of massacre. It goes on to say here that the U.S. carried out a brutal massacre with bombing attack in Deir ez-Zor province. The overnight air artillery strikes killed an estimated 100 pro-government fighters near the Euphrates River, according to the U.S. It claimed a right to self-defense, saying it was responding to an attack on its coalition forces. The Pentagon said Russian mercenaries were also killed, but Russia denies having personnel in the area. All right then, Russian mercenaries, though, could be like what we saw in Afrin. Just recently, we shared with you, showing you the video footage of 2 coffins leaving Afrin with British flags on them. No, I take that back. We didn't share it with you guys. We were on Paul Bagley's program. We shared that there. Speaking there about that, there were 2 coffins taken out from Afrin that were British mercenaries fighting along with the Kurds there in Afrin that were killed by the Turkish, being sent back home in boxes draped with British flags on them. It's very troubling to see this, because Russian mercenaries, Russia may be aware of them being there. They may be fighting along with the pro-Syrian forces there, but Russia is very cautious about acknowledging them as actual soldiers, as we see even in the case of Ukraine. That way, it's easier to say they weren't Russian soldiers or Russian advisors. But the mere fact that Russia is in a major upset, Moscow slams illegal U.S. presence in Syria as Pentagon reserves right for its defensive attacks, and the Russian UN ambassador really reminding his counterparts in a closed-door meeting that if the U.S. wasn't there, this wouldn't be happening. But yet at the same time making light of it, saying there were only 25 wounded in the attack. That lets you know, just like it was a couple of years ago, Russia retaliated, dropped a bunker buster in the mountains of Aleppo, knocking out an intelligence base there that killed Qatarians, Saudis, Turks, even 1 or 2 Israeli officials, and 1 American intelligence officer. Of course, the UN went into a major uproar, and mainstream media didn't want to cover that one either. But I think more and more we're being a little bit more pressure on mainstream media, forcing them to have to come out and deal with this particular type of information. And we know that BBC monitors closely Israeli News Live, as does RT. And who knows who all else covers it as well. But nonetheless, the U.S. did use some pretty heavy firepower. There's reports of F-22s, F-15, Strike Eagle was used in it. Also a C-130 attack that has the big gunners on the side. And even Apache helicopters were said to be part of that force that came in. So as the BBC reports there that the Assad regime is saying that it was a massacre, then I can see why they would believe that to be so. And of course, it is still conflicting reports over what the target really was. The Syrian government saying that they were after the oil field. The U.S. say that they were trying to attack the Free Syrian Army Air Base. And I can understand America retaliating because we do have American forces there embedded with the Free Syrian Army. Although I may not agree with our presence there, they are American soldiers, and we do support the American soldiers. We care for them. So be in prayer for both sides. I think that's the right thing to do. Anyway, I got some very interesting things we're going to be uploading to you guys later. We were at a rally last night in support of Trump. We were invited as Israeli News Live to cover the event. As far as I know, we were the only news organization was there, but we're going to be running 2 separate videos about that. May not be able to get to it till tomorrow because I have to make a trip this evening. But very interesting. Roger Stone was the guest speaker there. He spoke about the Kennedy assassination, which I'd like to air separately. But something else happened there. I think it was something that is going to go down in history. Something that people have not seen in a long time. The name of Jesus Christ was mentioned in the opening remarks. And I have never, to my knowledge, have never seen someone exalt Jesus Christ in a political rally before. I'm Stephen Ben-nun with Israeli News Live. Shalom.